9:10 a.m. the Superstation, the Future Radio. Hey, I'm your host, Brother Michael Imhotep. It is Sunday, October 14th, 2018, and we are live tonight. This is the 23rd anniversary celebration today for the Million Man March that took place October 1995. Minister Farrakhan was here in Detroit at the new Aretha Franklin Amphitheater, and yes, I was there. I tried to broadcast on Facebook Live some, and we were on the water. It's a bad signal, and I broadcasted some a little bit on YouTube as well. So it was a fantastic event today. I had to leave early because I had to get back home and finish getting ready for tonight's show. All right, so look, we have a lot to talk about tonight. This was a crazy, crazy week. That was even before the debacle at the White House, the meltdown at the White House with Kanye West and Jim Brown. Many people have been talking about it. I posted about it on Facebook some. We're going to talk about that some tonight, but we're going to deal with it from a different perspective. See, we're going to deal with this from a historical perspective, okay? So you don't want to miss this conversation. Okay, so we'll deal with what took place at the White House this past Thursday, October 11th. Kanye West met with Donald Trump for the second time. I'm still trying to find out what came out of the first meeting. Still trying to find that out when he met with Trump at Trump Towers, right? But this was an example of white supremacy by ventriloquism, as Dr. Michael Eric Dyson called it. And we know that Kanye West is mentally ill, but so is Donald Trump. Kanye West is mentally ill, and I sympathize him. Donald Trump is mentally ill too. So we'll deal with this from a historical perspective. So Kanye West went on a 10-minute rant. There are a lot of historical inaccuracies in what he said. He shed some light on some important issues also, but it was absorbed by 10 minutes of gibberish. So we'll talk about that. Then in Georgia, I didn't get a chance to really get to this story last week some. In Georgia, Secretary of State Brian Kemp, who is running for governor against Stacey Abrams, he is blocking 53,000 people from registering to vote. Now, Georgia has a history of voter suppression, rampant voter suppression. And it continues. And people are calling for him to, wait a second, you need to resign from office. How are you going to oversee an election that you're running in? You're running for governor, but you're the Secretary of State. How are you going to do that? Well, this, it's called white supremacy. That's how you do it. But there are growing calls for him to resign from office, as he should. So we'll deal with that, and also lawsuits were filed this past week by different groups. The Lawyers Commission, I think, was one of them, and to fight against this voter suppression that is here, this blatant voter suppression that's taking place here in Georgia. Okay, so we'll talk about that some as well. Now, this past Monday was October 8th. And October 8th, the U.S. celebrated Columbus Day, okay? And more and more cities are celebrating Indigenous Peoples Day. Indigenous Peoples Day. Number one, they're recognizing that Columbus was a mass murderer and one who inflicted genocide upon the indigenous people. And there were indigenous African people there as well. Two, I think some people are starting to realize Columbus never came to this land we call the United States of America, which he did not. When I do my lectures and I show you where he went on his 4 voyages, Columbus never came to this land we call the United States of America. So more cities are celebrating Indigenous Peoples Day instead of Columbus Day. So we'll talk some about that as well. And there was an Indigenous Peoples Day celebration here in Detroit. It's in downtown Detroit in front of the Spirit of Detroit. I ain't seen any African Americans down there. I think most of us still think we first came here August 20th, 1619 in Jamestown, Virginia. Even though that did happen, we were here going back tens of thousands of years, at least 51,700 years. So in the next couple of weeks, we're going to have Dr. David Imhotep, who wrote the book, The First Americans Were Africans, Documented Evidence, back on the show. because I just talked to him this past week, and his new book comes out. He said between Halloween, October 31st, and Thanksgiving. It's called The First Americans Were Africans Revisited. It has about an additional 200 pages. Now, also on tonight's show, we'll give you an update on the fight against the attack on the Charles H. Wright Museum of African American History and the attack to water down the progressive programming. We'll have Brother Paul Taylor and Sister Neb to call in and give us an update on that attack. And if it hasn't happened to an African American museum in your city yet, it's probably on its way. It's called gentrification. And gentrification is 21st century colonization. If you understand history, you know this. If you don't understand history, you'll be confused. And as Dr. Francis Cress Wilson and Nellie Fuller correctly taught us, if you do not understand European white supremacy and racism, what it is and how it works, everything else, and I do mean everything else that you think that you understand, will totally confuse you. So we'll deal with all that on tonight's show and a lot more. Now, on the African History Network show, hey, we focus on educating, empowering, and inspiring people of African descent throughout the diaspora and around the world, because right knowledge corrects wrong behavior. What you do for yourself, what you do to yourself, and what you allow other people to do to you and get away with is based upon what you think about yourself. What you think about yourself is based upon what you have been taught about yourself. What you've been taught about yourself is based upon everything you've read, heard, and seen about yourself. So when you control the radius of a man's thoughts, you can control the circumference of his actions, because the mind can't do or teach what it doesn't know. Now, we deal with a number of different topics here on the show. We deal with current events in history and politics, education, economic empowerment, entrepreneurship, relationships, love, sex, health issues, and much, much more. Sign up for our email newsletter, because I'm about to send one out. Sign up for our email newsletter. Text the word Kemet, K-E-M-E-T. Text the word Kemet, K-E-M-E-T, to 22828 to sign up for our email newsletter. Also go to our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. All right. And last week, I totally forgot. Okay, first of all, these shows we have them podcasted at our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Email us at info@AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, info@AfricanHistoryNetwork.com if you want to advertise on the show. I forgot to let you know that I will be speaking in Detroit at Hartford Memorial Baptist Church on Saturday, October 20th, once again, for their social justice ministry. Sister Mary Grant invited me to come back and speak again. It's taking place 8:30 a.m. to 1 p.m. Hartford Memorial Baptist Church in Detroit. Tickets are $25 for the social justice conference. They're serving breakfast and lunch. The workshops I'm doing repeat. One is at 9 a.m. The other's at 10:15 a.m. And this year's theme is dealing with Dr. King. We know April 4th we commemorated the 50th anniversary of the assassination of Dr. King. So this year's theme is Dr. King, Now Is This America? Dr. King, Now Is This America? Based on Jeremiah 29:7. Okay, chapter 29, verse 7. My workshop is dealing with the distortion of the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. The revolutionary will not be televised on the television. The distortion of the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. The revolutionary will not be televised on the television, because I'm dealing with the revolutionary Dr. King, not the emasculated Dr. King they show you every Dr. King Day on the television. Hartford Memorial Baptist Church is located at 18700 James Cousins Freeway, Detroit, Michigan. Visit our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. We have the information there. And also, the presentation I'm going to do, we have it on DVD and digital download at our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. All right, so let's jump into this. Let's jump into this topic dealing with Kanye West. Okay, going back to the White House to meet with Donald John Trump, whose policies are totally against, most of them, totally against African Americans. Now, this is not an attack on Kanye. I want people to understand this. I recognize Kanye is mentally ill and he needs help. He needs to be back on his medication. So this is not an attack on Kanye. But Kanye West and Jim Brown were at the White House this past week on Thursday, October 11th, to discuss criminal justice reform over lunch. Kanye West went on a 10-minute rambling, incoherent, historically inaccurate rant. This minstrel show set African Americans back about 153 years. Oh, yes, it did. This was a debacle, if you understand history. Now, I know he has mental health issues, and he has never recovered from the sudden death of his mother, Dr. Donda West, who taught African American literature. And we talked about this back in May 2018 when he made his idiotic comments during the TMZ interview where he said slavery sounded like a choice. Which historians did you consult with? Because when I researched this and I consult with historians, that is contrary to the history. And I brought one of my teachers, Professor Kabahaya Watha Kamene, formerly known as Booker T. Coleman. You've seen him in the Hidden Colors documentaries. You've seen him in the 1804 documentary, The Hidden History of Haiti. We're in Elementary Genocide Part 3, that documentary from director Raheem Shabazz together. We're in the Black Friday documentaries together. That's contrary to the history. Now, because I know he is mentally ill, I'm not going to go hard on him like I would somebody else. Even though there were some issues that he talked about that were important, like the need for more mental health clinics, and he should probably check himself in. Criminal justice reform, opening industries and needing tax breaks for corporations, and a quick reference to reparations. I'm not sure why these corporations need more tax breaks, really, because they have record profits. They just got a huge tax break with the $1.4 trillion tax cut. And the GOP and the House of Representatives are trying to give another huge tax break to corporations. So I don't know why they need tax breaks in Chicago, but okay, if you say so. And there was a quick reference to reparations. Now, it's kind of strange you talk about we need reparations when just back in May, you said slavery sounded like a choice. That sounds kind of like a contradiction. All right. Now, these points largely got absorbed by his rambling comments that were, as Dr. Michael Eric Dyson explained it on MSNBC, The Beat with Ari Melber, white supremacy by ventriloquism. A black mouth is moving, but white supremacist ideas are flowing from his mouth. Now, see, Kanye West didn't call Donald Trump out on any of his policies that are harmful to African Americans, like redeclaring the war on drugs, May 12, 2017, which is what his white supremacist Attorney General Jefferson Beauregard Sessions III did, who in 1986 was deemed too racist to be a federal judge. And Coretta Scott King wrote an 8 or 9 page letter at the time and submitted it to the Senate Judiciary Committee saying that if Jefferson Beauregard Sessions III became a federal judge, it would dismantle her husband's, Dr. King's, legacy. So he didn't call him out on that. He didn't talk about how Trump is attacking the Affordable Health Care Act, which gave health care to 3 million non-elderly African Americans who did not already have health care. I'm pretty sure 1 or 2 of them lived in Chicago. I don't think all 3 million didn't live in Chicago. That's under attack. Some of us have already lost health care. And Trump has cut the subsidies that go to keep the health premiums low. Then if you look last year, when they had open enrollment, they cut the number of days for open enrollment in half, from 90 to 45. And then they cut the marketing budget by 90%. Silence. I just find that shocking. Just silence. So then we have Donald Trump and Jefferson Beauregard Sessions III backing off the consent decrees with police departments like they're in Chicago. They tried to go to court to back out of the consent decree with the Chicago Police Department, which is one of the most corrupt police departments in the country. Do you understand, from 2010 to 2017, the Chicago Police Department had to pay out $709 million in police misconduct suits? What we're going to talk about this later, but hold on. You got to read this article from AtlantaBlackStar.com. It's from the Associated Press, so many outlets carried this story. And this particular one is from AtlantaBlackStar.com. Trump calls on Chicago to embrace stop and frisk policing. This is from October 9th. Because 2 days before this meeting that Kanye had with Trump, Trump was in Chicago speaking to police advocating for stop and frisk to come back, and stop and frisk has been ruled by a federal judge to be unconstitutional. It's illegal. And here you got Donald Trump, the first Russian president of the United States, calling for this to be brought back, but he's not calling for it to be brought back in West Virginia or Ohio or Maine or any of these other communities that have been ravaged by opioid addiction, and he's not dealing with the crimes associated with opioid addiction. He's not calling for stop and frisk in white communities. He's dog whistling the white supremacists. $709 million from 2010 to 2017, the Chicago Police Department paid out in police misconduct lawsuits. Almost $1 billion in less than 10 years, and Trump is silent? Not only that, when you read this article, the city of Chicago had to borrow $225 million to pay out lawsuits. And Trump is silent? Come on. Come on. That doesn't even make sense. So, it's good that Kanye said that Chicago doesn't need stop and frisk, but Trump can't order stop and frisk in the first place. It's been ruled illegal. So, and then we go back to January 2018 in the meeting dealing with immigration and DACA. And Trump called immigrants from African nations and Haiti and El Salvador S-hole countries. Now, coming up here on the break in a couple minutes. This past Thursday, my man Roland Martin on his daily digital show, Roland Martin Unfiltered. Oh, you got to go. You follow Roland Martin on Facebook. Follow Roland on YouTube. You got to watch this show. It's just like News One now, except you don't have commercials. And it's not on TV. It's on digital platforms. Thursday, October 11th, Roland broke down Kanye's statements point by point from a historical and factual perspective, along with my man, Dr. Greg Carr, who's the chair of the Afro-American Studies Department at Howard University. We've had Dr. Greg Carr here on the show before. We've had Dr. Greg Carr actually here in the studio before. So when we come back from the break, I'm going to share some of the excerpts of this discussion with you. I will also deal with some of the history of why African Americans switched from the Republican Party to the Democratic Party, because most people do not understand this history. And it wasn't because we were in love with white people. It was because of public policies that were beneficial to us. And it was because of an adoption of an anti-civil rights stance in the Republican Party when President Herbert Hoover was president from 1929 to 1933. It was called the Lily White Movement. You listen to the African History Network show right here on 910 AM, the Superstation. I'm Michael Imhotep. We'll be back in a few minutes. All right, guys, stand by. We'll be back in 2 minutes. You got to take a mandatory break. You don't want to miss this. Okay, so you got the clip queued up.
Which, the first one, you want to talk about the wild rambling, or you want to, I see the other one that say
it starts at 4:57. You see that? I have 4 segments. I mean, you see the email? You see the email I sent you, right?
Yeah, the email.
Okay,
this was the first clip that I got, but I don't remember which one it was.
Start at 4:57.
All right.
Start at the 4:57 mark. We'll go to 12:16. Because in the email, I had the different segments of that clip we're going to play. And I had the start and stop point.
Okay. So,
you see what I'm saying? Yeah.
All right, got you.
Start in right about 4:57. If it's 4:55, it's all right.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So the first video is going to be the rambling.
Yeah, we're going to play 4 segments of that.
All right.
All right, guys, stand by. Share this broadcast on your Facebook page. Invite your friends to tune in also, okay? And then
that last one is the outrageous voter.
Huh?
The next one is going to be the outrageous voter.
No, it's in the email I sent you. That's all one clip.
Okay.
It's in the email. All right, guys. Hey, at AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, we've got Meltrek. Exploring Ancient Africa. This is for children. We have the cartoon. And we have the storybook. This is available right now at AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Full color, 47 pages. This teaches our children ancient African history. And then the second one deals with exploring pre-Columbia America. Exploring pre-Columbia America. Okay? All right. How much time do we have before we come back from the break? Okay. Hold on. All right. We got a minute now. Okay. You don't want to miss this. Share this broadcasting on your Facebook page. Invite your friends to tune in. You don't want to miss this. You're not going to hear this type of analysis, especially from a historical perspective other places. And most African Americans do not know the history of how we switched from being Republicans to Democrats and why. And it was for good reason too. It was for really good reasons. So
20 seconds.
All right. We're back in 20 seconds. Visit AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. We have a bundle pack where you get the 2 cartoons, you get a storybook, you get a coloring book, and some other stuff also. It's on sale. I think it's $79.99. Or you can order this individually. Yes. Okay. Welcome back to the African History Network show right here on 910 AM, the Superstation, the Future Radio. Hey, I'm your host, Brother Michael Imhotep. It is Sunday, October 14th, 2018, and we are live. Hey, I was down at the new Aretha Franklin Amphitheater, formerly Shane Park. I was down there with Minister Farrakhan and the Nation of Islam. We were celebrating the 23rd anniversary of the Million Man March. We know this Tuesday, October 16th, is the official anniversary, but hey, they wanted to do it today. It's a weekend, it's a Sunday, and it was packed. All right, so right before the break, we were talking, I was giving the intro to our discussion here, dealing with what we saw take place this past Thursday, October 11th, at the White House. And Dr. Michael Eric Dyson on The Beat with Ari Melber on MSNBC described it as white supremacy by ventriloquism. Now, we're going to break this down from a historical perspective because a lot of people are dealing with feelings and opinions. I'm a researcher. I deal with facts and evidence. Proper documentation ends all conversation. So this past Thursday, Roland Martin on his daily digital show, Roland Martin Unfiltered, he dealt with the history. Well, first of all, he dealt with some of these comments by Kanye point by point. And he dealt with some history as well and some historical inaccuracies that Kanye was spouting as well. Now, once again, I'm not trying to attack Kanye. He's mentally ill. We all know this. His family knows this. Okay? I also said on Facebook, if he was with a real sister, she wouldn't let him go out here and continually make a damn fool out of himself also. If he was with a black sister, a real sister, she wouldn't let him go out here and keep making a fool out of himself also. I said that as well. I stand by that. So let's go to this clip here from Roland Martin Unfiltered, okay? Let's take a listen to this. Turn up in here so they can hear Facebook.
Now, Kanye is correct in terms of the jobs not being available. But the issue there was systemic racism as to why black folks were not getting those level of jobs. Hit play.
Iraq, what people call Chirac, which is actually our murder rate is going down by 20% every year. I just talked to the superintendent, met with Michael Sachs, that's Rom's right-hand man. So I think it's the bravery that helps you keep this game called life. You know, they try to scare me.
Go back to about 4 minute mark.
My other friends, but
yeah, I'm gonna back it up. I want you to hear some previous comments, then we'll continue. We're gonna start it at about the 4 minute mark. Okay, Kanye is talking about why he's talking about African Americans becoming Democrats because of welfare. Go ahead.
These mothers, first of all, that wasn't somehow just going to black people. What happened was federal regulators, members of Congress, want to provide benefits to women, to single women. Now, the problem is the way they wrote it is that if they got married, then the benefits would decrease. What they failed to factor in is you could get married, but what would happen if that man was unemployed? Why did you have significant unemployment rates of black men? Because of systemic racism in America that froze black men and black women out of a significant number of jobs. Now, many people would watch the Diane Carroll show Claudine, where she was, quote, hiding her man from folks when it came to getting benefits. That was the case. But trust me, this was not a federal policy that was targeting black people. It was a federal policy that represented any woman who received any benefits from the federal government. Now, Kanye is correct in terms of the jobs not being available. But the issue there was systemic racism as to why black folks were not getting those level of jobs. Hit play.
Iraq, what people call Chirac, which is actually our murder rate is going down by 20% every year. I just talked to the superintendent, met with Michael Sachs, that's Rom's right-hand man. So I think it's the bravery that helps you beat this game called life. You know, they tried to scare me to not wear this hat, my own friends, but this hat, it gives me power in a way. You know, my dad and my mom separated, so I didn't have a lot of male energy in my home. And also, I'm married to a family that, you know, not a lot of male energy going on. It's beautiful, though. But there's times where, you know, it's something about, you know, I love Hillary, I love everyone, right? But the campaign, I'm with her, just didn't make me feel as a guy that didn't get to see my dad all the time, like a guy that could play catch with his son.
Stop right there.
It was something about when I put this hat on, and maybe...
Stop right there. All right, so here's the deal. He talked about, of course, what drove the prison population was the mental health cuts that took place in the 80s and 90s. You notice Kanye West made no mention of the devastating impact of crack cocaine and how there was a disparity between crack cocaine and powder cocaine. So if you were white, you used powder cocaine, that was a 100-to-1 difference between the ratio of if you use crack cocaine to powder cocaine. That what drove the criminal justice system. But here's what Kanye West did not say. He talked about the cuts to mental health. Who made those cuts? Ronald Wilson Reagan. Those were the massive cuts that were made between 1980 and 1988. So if you're going to make that particular point, then you must do so. What then happened was the cuts took place on the federal level, which then trickled down to the state level, and then down to the county and city levels. And so you had folks who then said, mental illness, we don't care about that. We're going to have drastic cuts. It was Republican Ronald Reagan who drove that. It's very easy to Google. Something else Kanye did not mention. Press play.
Superman. You made a Superman. That's my favorite superhero. And you made a Superman cape for me also as a guy that looks up to you, looks up to Rap Marin, looks up to American industry guys. Non-political, no bullshit. Put the beep on it, however you want to do it, 5 seconds delay, and just goes in and gets it done. Right now, you gave me the heart to go to Adidas because at Adidas, when I went in 2015, we were a $14 billion company, losing $2 billion a year. Now we have a $38 billion market cap. It's called the Yeezy effect. And I went to Casper. We had a meeting in Chicago. And I said, you have to bring manufacturing onshore. It's not even shore, into the core. It's not about the borders, the core of Adidas. And Chicago is the core of Middle America. We have to make Middle America strong. So I had the balls, because I had enough balls to put on this hat. I mean, this Adidas thing made me a billionaire, and I could have lost $200 million walking away from that deal. But even with that, I knew it was more important for me to take the chance of walking away from that deal than to have no fathers in Chicago with no homes. And when we do have prison reprobation, because it's habilitation, not rehabilitation, because we didn't have the abilities in the first place. We never had anyone that taught us. We didn't teach us. Exactly, we had no one that taught us, right? So it's more important than any specific deal, anything that we bring jobs into America.
Stop right
and
there.
that we...
Kanye West talked about the value of Adidas. Go to my iPad, please. According to this breakdown here, the brand value of Adidas in 2015 was $6.2 billion, and then it was in 2007 it was $7.9 billion. Not quite sure where he got the $14 billion and $38 billion from. So the second thing is, when you talk about what Kanye West just said, did you just hear him say prison reparations? So is Kanye West saying that he is supportive of the United States providing reparations to African Americans? If so, he might want to further explain that. He talked about the need for jobs as well. Of course, the fundamental problem with violence in Chicago was not the issue of guns, it's actually jobs and education, which actually has been a problem for the last 70 to 80 years, because that's all as a result of Jim Crow. Chicago is called one of the most segregated cities in the United States. Folks might not want to talk about 1983, when Congressman Harold Washington was running for mayor, and when Walter Mondale came to Chicago to campaign with him on the north side, they bombed his car with eggs, attacking Harold Washington and Walter Mondale, because white folks in Chicago did not want to see a black man to become mayor of the city. Why? Because he would be in control of those resources. You don't want to talk about the political folks on the city council, Ed Verdoliak and others, who said we're going to stop Harold Washington from doing anything while he is mayor of Chicago. See, those are things that Kanye West somehow does not want to mention. And so when you talk about bringing jobs back to Chicago, well, then I'm trying to understand, Kanye, then what is the person across from you doing about that? Because Donald Trump has never presented a plan for Chicago. Just so y'all know, I've been at 2 of the 3 meetings he's had with television anchors. There's only one person who was in that room who has ever asked Donald Trump about Chicago and his plan for Chicago. And you're looking at him. And do you know what he said? My plan is strength. That was the word that he used. Now, it was an off-the-record meeting, so I decided to go ahead and tell you exactly what took place. Because, see, what I can't stand is to continue lying about, let's do something about Chicago, when you were asked directly by me, what is your plan for Chicago? And the answer was strength. That was the answer. Now, maybe he's thinking Kanye gets power from wearing that red hat. Somehow that's his cape. But the reality is, strength is a word. It's not a plan. Press play.
Provide a transition with mental health and the American education curriculum that Jim has worked on. Larry Hoover also has a curriculum that he's worked on. We have Montessori curriculums that we worked on. WeWorks has a beautiful curriculum. The Waldorf establishment has a curriculum. We have meditation. There's a lot of things affecting our mental health that makes us do crazy things, that puts us back into that trap door called the 13th Amendment. I did say abolish with the hat on, because why would you keep something around that's a trap door? If you build in a floor, the Constitution is the base of our industry, right? Of our country, of our company. Would you build a trap door that if you mess up and you accidentally something happens, you fall and you end up next to the Unabomber?
Come back, man.
Stop right there. Okay, so that's just an excerpt of what Roland was breaking down. That's just an excerpt of Kanye's comments. Now, a couple of things, okay? And we have a guest coming on in about 6 minutes here for about 15 minutes to the top of the hour. Then we're going to pick up this conversation, this topic again in the top of the second hour, because I have some more to share with you and some history to get into. So Kanye talked about the 13th Amendment. So early in the week, and last week, I think it was the last week or early this week, Kanye tweeted that the 13th Amendment should be abolished. Then he made a statement saying the 13th Amendment should be abolished. He then tweeted a clarification, and he's speaking specifically about the section of the 13th Amendment that states that, so if we look at the 13th Amendment in the U.S. Constitution, okay, this is from 1865. The 13th Amendment was ratified December 6, 1865. It was adopted December 18, 1865. This is what freed enslaved Africans from chattel slavery. This is after the Civil War ends. There are 2 sections to the 13th Amendment. Section 1 reads, neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for crime, whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction. Section 2 of the 13th Amendment reads, Congress shall have power to enforce this article by appropriate legislation. So after his initial statement, before this took place Thursday, Kanye made his initial statement. People said, oh, Kanye wants to abolish the 13th Amendment. Then he he clarified it, and there was an interview he did with TMZ where he clarified it, and he was talking about the section he's talking about the part of Section 1 that states except as punishment for crime whereof the party shall be duly convicted, okay? But you don't abolish the 13th Amendment. You just change it. You just amend it. You don't abolish it. So the words that he's using, now, so what's problematic is that he did, I think it was last week sometime, he did a interview with TMZ to clarify the statement, but then he goes here and meets with Trump and acts like he didn't do a clarification. So once again, he's mentally ill. I understand that. But I want people to understand Kanye, in the clarification that he gave prior to this meeting taking place Thursday, October 11th, he was talking about the portion of Section 1 that deals with being duly convicted of a crime. Now, what's important for people to understand is the process of altering the U.S. Constitution. Because there's like a lot of people say, oh, well, the 13th Amendment, what Kanye says, oh, it should be ratified, oh, it should be abolished or altered. And then you have some people saying, oh, the Electoral College should be abolished. Do you understand the process of altering or amending the U.S. Constitution? A bill has to be drafted. Usually bill starts, go to Schoolhouse Rock, right, on YouTube. Remember Schoolhouse Rock? I'm Bill on Capitol Hill. Usually bill starts in the House of Representatives. Some start in the U.S. Senate, but usually start in the House of Representatives. Okay? It has to get a sponsor, be drawn up, get a sponsor, come out of committee. It has to pass both branches of Congress, the U.S. House of Representatives and the U.S. Senate, by a 2/3 majority vote. 2/3 majority vote. Then it has to be ratified by 3/4 of the state legislators. 3/4 of the state legislatures. That's 38 out of 50. There are 50 states. For any alteration, any change, any amendment to the U.S. Constitution, this is the process to ratify the U.S. Constitution. Okay? It has to pass 3/4 of the state legislatures. So when you talk about abolishing or getting rid of the Electoral College, many people say this, but they don't tell you the process for doing it. So you can't on the one hand say don't vote, but then say you want to abolish the Electoral College, because that comes from a vote. That comes from an electoral process. You can't say don't vote for members of your state legislature, the state House of Representatives, the state Senate, and then talk about you want an amendment to the Constitution. That's a contradiction. But see, if you don't understand how this works, then you sit up here and make these statements. Okay? So once again, when Kanye, because I saw the interview he did with TMZ to clarify. The other problem was Kanye. If Kanye's going to go into a meeting like this thing was viewed all around the country and outside the country. He needs to take some people. He needs to take a team in with him who are knowledgeable of the issues, of the facts, have their talking points together, and not just talking off the top of their head. Because see, right-wing media, Fox News Network, The Blaze, right-wing media, Trump TV, they're using this, right, to their advantage. And then, because they're saying, oh, Kanye gets it, Kanye's with Trump, blah, 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 right? Then Trump, after that, he was in Ohio. I think it was Ohio Trump was in. And Trump is asking for African Americans to honor him with their vote. And he's using Kanye's support of him to try to lure African Americans into supporting him. Which is ridiculous. Okay? All right, so we're going to go back to the clip here in just a minute here. I'm going to pick it up at the 20-minute, 8-second mark. Okay, I want you to hear this. All right? And so he dealt with abolishing the 13th Amendment. And then also, what's interesting is Kanye talks about jobs going to China. while he's wearing a Make America Great Again hat. Now, what period of time are you talking about America was so great you want to go back to? Because, see, when Trump was asked that question, Trump talked about, he talked about, I think he said 1800 sometime. I'll try to pull up that exact quote. But the period of time Trump is talking about going back to, African Americans didn't have the right to vote. Well, let me take that back. They were dealing with Jim Crow segregation. It was the 15th Amendment of 1870 that gave African American men the right to vote. Okay? But because of Jim Crow, you're going to have obstacles and obstacles put in the way of us voting. Poll taxes, literacy tests. You have the White Citizens Council, founded in 1954 in Mississippi, as a direct backlash to the Brown versus Board of Education decision. Okay, you're going to have all of these things. So when you actually look, what period of time are you talking about was so great you want to go back to? It's a period of time, oftentimes before African Americans had civil rights, before all of the obstacles to us voting were removed. And also, in many cases, a time before women had the right to vote. I mean, actually had the right to vote. Not be a landowner and vote, but actually had the right to vote. Okay? All right, so let's pick this. Let's pick this. Let's go to this next clip here I want you to hear.
Okay, first of all, y'all can advance it past the I-plane, because I want to pick it up from there. So let me do a couple of things. He talked about the 13th Amendment, which was ratified in 1865. First of all, we do know, of course, the 245 years of slavery, it was illegal for black folks to know how to read. The 13th Amendment was one of the Reconstruction Amendments. It was the first Reconstruction Amendments. There were three: 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment. And what he's talking about is that slavery is in the Constitution because it is allowed in the prison system. Kanye then says, well, we need to have pardons. If the person who is sitting across from the table actually has not done a significant number of pardons. He criticized the pardons of President Barack Obama of folks who were nonviolent offenders. And so you can rant on and on about the importance of pardons when the person across from you is the one who isn't actually giving those pardons. Then he brings up Larry Hoover, somebody who is serving 6 life sentences for being a murderous gang member in Chicago. His lawyer is in there. You're going to hear in a second when the lawyer said, well, yeah, I mean, he's accused of doing this behind the bars, but even if he did, he should be out.
It's 3 minutes.
Okay.
You might want to ask the folks in Chicago about that. But here's the other deal. You heard Kanye talk about, oh my God, Ford needs to have the dopest designs. Henry, go to my iPad, please. Folks, because of the Donald Trump tariffs, Ford prepared to mass layoffs after losing $1 billion to Donald Trump's trade tariffs. A little hard, Kanye, for Ford to do what you say they should be doing when Donald Trump's tariffs have cost them $1 billion. See, this is what happens when you go into the Oval Office and you just start talking, and then you just start pulling stuff out your ass, and you don't actually have facts or details to back it up. Press play.
Nothing, I just
Okay. Stop it right there.
Everything.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Play that clip. He's talking about China. I'm sorry. That was me.
Putting people in positions to have to do illegal
That was
things
me. Sorry.
to end up in the cheapest factory ever, the prison system.
I'll tell you what, that was pretty impressive. I hate to say this, Jim. You want to say something? What do you do after that? Please.
If he doesn't look good, we don't look good.
Great, right?
That's right.
Isn't that a great statement?
Yes, it is.
It's so
It makes a lot of sense.
Come back to me.
Yeah.
He talked about, of course, China. He talked about, of course, bringing jobs back to America. This is who is sitting in the Oval Office wearing a Make America Great Again hat. Henry, go to my iPad. Some MAGA hats made in China may increase in price because of tariffs. I wonder if Kanye West actually looked at the tag on his hat to see if the hat was made in the United States or made in China. How stupid can you be to complain about jobs should be coming back from China to America, and how proud you are wearing, making it feel like you are Superman, putting on a Make America Great Again hat, fool, when a lot of the hats are made in China. Press play.
Okay, stop.
Stop it
there. We'll stop it there. Okay, so I'm going to I'm going to pause it right there. I got, I think, one more clip to share with you. But what I want to do is I want to get into some of the history of, in one of the earlier clips, and I think I missed it here, I want to get into some of the history of why African Americans switched from being Republicans to Democrats. Because I hear a whole lot of people speculating, and they're getting part of the history, but a lot of the crucial information, right, they're not focusing on. Okay, so one, and this is all researchable. Okay, when you listen to my show, you want to get a pen and a pad so you can take copious notes, because you know I'm going to drop this information on you, all right? And then also, I forgot, coming back from the break, I forgot to tell you, be sure to visit our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. People have been asking for more things that teach, for more products that teach our children their history. So we have the Meltrek cartoons, animated series for children exploring ancient Africa, and then also exploring pre-Columbia America. And then also we have the Meltrek storybook as well that goes along with episode 1. And there's a book for episode 2, if I remember correctly, as well. This is full color, okay? So visit our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. We have the information there. We have it right on the homepage of our website, and we have a bundle pack there for your children as well. And it's a great animated series. And the sister, Dr. Ma'at, who created this, has gotten it in some of the schools as well, which is fantastic also. So we're going to have her on in the next upcoming weeks as well to talk about this. And then also, I want to remind you that Saturday, October 20th, at Hartford Memorial Baptist Church. I will be there. I'm speaking at their Social Justice Ministry Conference. Once again, they invited me back. And this year's theme is Dr. King, Now Is This America. Dr. King, Now Is This America. And we know this past April 4th, we commemorated the 50th anniversary of the assassination of Dr. King. Okay, so my workshop is dealing with the distortion of the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. The revolutionary will not be televised on the television. Okay, visit our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, for more information. And it's 8:30 a.m. to 1 p.m. Saturday, October 20th. Okay, and my workshop repeats 9 a.m. and 10:25 a.m. Okay, all right. So when we look at the history of why African Americans became Democrats, all right? NPR, National Public Radio, has a really good article about that, and there's some other articles, but they have a really good article about this entitled, Why Did Black Voters Flee the Republican Party in the 1960s? Why did black voters flee the Republican Party in the 1960s, okay? And this dealt with public policy. All right, so black voters began supporting the Democratic Party, and so we know coming out of the Civil War, coming out of slavery, most African Americans were Republicans because it was the Republican Party that was basically the party of the Union. Okay, Abraham Lincoln was a Republican, Frederick Douglass was a Republican. The Republican Party was founded in 1854. Okay, to be as a direct result of the Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854, okay? The Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854 dealt with westward expansion of slavery, okay, into territories. And it left into these western territories, and it left the decision of whether or not to have slavery in these western territories up to the people who were living in the territory, as opposed to being dictated by the federal government. That's called the Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854. This is one of the things that leads to the U.S. Civil War. Okay, so the Republican Party is founded in 1854 to be a counter to the Democratic Party. Okay, and what we know is the Democratic Party is going to be founded in 1828. They're known as Jacksonian Democrats after President Andrew Jackson. And the Democratic Party is coming out of a previous party called the Democratic-Republican Party. Okay, so you got to understand this history to understand this. So the Democratic Party was largely the party of the slave owners. Now the Democratic Party did not create slavery. Slavery was brought to this country in the British colonies from Britain. This is long before the Democratic Party, long before the Declaration of Independence, long before the U.S. Constitution. So it wasn't the Democratic Party that created slavery. Okay, however, when we look at 1828 and the creation of the Democratic Party, they're largely going to be the party of the plantation owners, the slaveholders, things like this, okay? All right, so after the Civil War, 1865 to 1877, you have a period of time called Reconstruction. And Reconstruction is a period of time where African Americans are trying to make gains. Some of us are gaining land. Some of us are going to have this land taken back from us. The General Order number 15, well, you have the 40 acres and a mule. General Order, I think it's General Order number 15, January 1865, William T. Sherman, and is going to give 400,000, about 400,000 acres of land to 40,000 African Americans in coastal land in South Carolina and Georgia. It's not all of the South. It's coastal land in South Carolina and Georgia. Okay, so and most of this land is going to be taken back by President Andrew Johnson, who became president after Lincoln was assassinated, April of 1865. Because Johnson was a white supremacist and he sympathized with the slave owners. Okay, so we're going to have a lot of this land that we acquire. Most of that is going to be taken back from us. Okay, so you have to understand some of this background history. So black voters began supporting the Democratic Party in greater numbers almost a century ago, but the events of 1964 marked a dramatic shift in voting patterns that still are with us today. Okay, now Vincent Hutchings, Hutchings. Vincent Hutchings is a political scientist who studies voter patterns at the University of Michigan, U of M, and he says the first major shift in black party affiliation away from the Republican Party happened during the Great Depression. Okay, so we know the stock market crashed in 1929. This is during President Herbert Hoover is the president at this time. President Roosevelt, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, does not win the election until 1933. Now, President Roosevelt's second administration, led by the New Deal, made the Democrats a beacon for black Americans deeply affected by the crushing poverty that was plaguing the country. When you studied the Great Depression, it was horrific for white people. What do you think it was for us? It was 10 times worse. We lost over 200,000 farms during the Great Depression. We lost millions of acres of land during the Great Depression. But many black voters stuck with the party of Lincoln. Okay? Now, Vincent Hutchings said, quote, the data suggests that even as late as 1960, only about 2/3 of African Americans were identified with the Democratic Party. That's okay. Democratic Party is about 66%. Quote, now 2/3 is a pretty big number, but when you compare it to today, that number hovers at about 90%. Okay, so as late as 1960, 2/3 of African Americans were Democratic because they had switched over going into the 1930s and the 1940s. Okay, so according to Vincent Hutchings and the Tufts University historian Peniel Joseph, Peniel, it was Barry Goldwater in 1964 who ran for president, who was anti-civil rights and a Republican, that continued this shift. Barry Goldwater for Republicans becomes a metaphor for the Republican response for this revolution that's happening in the United States, Peniel Joseph said. The revolution was Freedom Summer. Okay, we're coming up on the break. We'll continue this on the other side of the break. You don't want to miss this history lesson. You listen to the African History Network show right here on 910 a.m. The Superstation, the Future Radio. I'm Michael Imhotep. We'll be back in a few minutes.
Hi, this is Jack Lessenberry, and I hope your weekend was great.
All right, stand by, everybody. Stand by. You don't want to miss this. Okay, go ahead. Visit our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Hey, if you like this type of information, you can help support the African History Network. You can buy our DVD lectures at our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. We've got the Meltrek. We've got Meltrek. We've got the cartoons. We've got the coloring book, the activity book. We have that stuff in the bundle pack also. And then also we have because of Columbus Day, we have the bundle pack, the Africans that came before, the Africans that were here before Columbus. The Africans that were here before Columbus. And that is a bundle pack. 8 DVD bundle packs on sale, $70. Includes one of my presentations as well. And that deals with our history here before Columbus. Okay? So check that out also. Okay, we'll be back in a couple of minutes here.
With proven general recovery programs.
I never thought that I could be somebody.
We'll be back in a couple minutes here. How's everybody doing?
I have something to hold on to for strength. I'm in recovery, getting the help I need.
All right, who we have here? Hillary was a campaign worker for Goldwater. Yeah, and then Hillary switched over to a Democrat. So if you want to bring that up, you need to do some research. Just like many of us, Hillary's political views were shaped by her father.
You know, that makes me think about something, because I think about
she was about 18 years old at the time. She goes to college, goes to law school. She switches over to be a Democrat. She's been a Democrat for over 40 years.
I've always been the opposite. I think I was very numb, I would isolate myself.
All right, we're back in the, how's everybody doing? We're back in a few minutes. Kimberly Akbar. All right, share this broadcast on your Facebook page.
I love people. I love to talk to people. I love.
We're back in a couple minutes here.
I have a really hard time.
And then let me post the information here.
I think having a hard time settling those other traits.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, I see where you're.
Let me post the information here on the thread of the broadcast for our bundle packs as well. So this is the one for the Africans who were here before Columbus.
Hey, where's the next threat coming from, right?
The Africans who were here before Columbus.
We are the future of
okay, we have that bundle pack. And then also,
Superstation is in a league of its own.
You can.
We are the only talk radio station in the Metro Detroit.
Okay, here's the Meltrek bundle pack. Also, that I talked about. This is great for children. We have these shipping out on Tuesday this week. Okay, we have the Meltrek bundle pack. We're coming back from the break. Calling numbers 313-778-7600. 313-778-7600 is the call-in number if you have a question or comment. Okay, and you could donate to the African History Network also.
Well, what are you doing in my room? I'm your sensitive venture.
All right.
Don't you remember me? Don't you know?
Who we have? I ain't gonna fight the slavery sound like a choice. Boss 13 comma I was done with Kanye. Yeah, Kanye, I don't buy his music. I know he's mentally ill. Okay? He does not understand history either. He does not understand history. Okay?
I'm sure your mom would take you. You're right. I should.
But I'm not gonna beat up on him.
Climb puddles, catch frogs, and climb trees. Hey, Mom! Yeah, hon. Stephen!
All right, do me a favor. Can you turn that down, please? Because I'm still broadcasting on Facebook Live. All right. Donate to the African History Network, paypal.me/the AHN show. Paypal.me/the AHN show. Okay? Donate to the African History Network there. That helps us to stay on the air, keep broadcasting, keep doing the research, etc. Okay, so the next clip starts at the did we do the one starting at 2310?
We stopped.
Well, where are we at now?
2315.
We're at 2315?
Yep.
Okay, so that I'm gonna play that clip there. Yeah, I'm gonna play. We at 2315?
Yep.
Okay, so I'm gonna play that clip, and then the next clip starts in about a minute. About 1 hour in, but we'll do this clip here.
You ready?
Yeah.
the future of radio.
Welcome back to the African History Network show right here on 910 AM, the Superstation of Future Radio. Hey, I want to remind you that for children, people have been asking me, okay, so what products do you have for children? Well, of course, we have the trilogy, Afro Man and the Protectors of the Book of Knowledge, animated series for children. But we just got in, for children, the Meltrek, Meltrek, the Meltrek cartoons. Episode 1, Exploring Ancient Africa, and then also we have the Meltrek storybook as well, which deals with ancient Africa as well and teaches this to our children. It's full color, 47 pages. Okay, we have this right now at AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. You can buy them separately or in a bundle pack. Okay, right on the homepage, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. And because of Columbus Day and Indigenous Peoples Day, we have a new bundle pack, a new DVD bundle pack. It's an 8 DVD bundle pack called The Africans That Were Here Before Columbus. The Africans That Were Here Before Columbus. It includes the double lecture I did with Dr. David Imhotep, who wrote the book, The First Americans Were Africans, Documented Evidence. It includes a lecture from Dr. Ivan Van Sertima, dealing with They Came Before Columbus, and some other DVDs as well. That's right on the homepage of AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Okay, and we know October 8th, the U.S. celebrated Columbus Day, and then October 12th, Friday, October 12th, was the anniversary of Columbus landing in the so-called New World, okay, which was October 12th, 1492. All right, so let's go back to what I was talking about right before the break, and we're dealing with the history of picking up on the meeting that Kanye had with Trump and some of the statements that were made. And one of the statements Kanye made was dealing with African Americans switching to the Democratic Party because of welfare and things like this. That's not true. Okay, we're dealing with the actual history of why African Americans switch from Republican to Democratic. Okay, switch from the Republican Party to the Democratic Party. Okay, all right. So, in 1964, Barry Goldwater, who was a U.S. Senator from Arizona, ran for president, and he became the Republican nominee for president. And he was vehemently opposed to civil rights. Okay? So Barry Goldwater for Republicans becomes a metaphor for the Republican response for this revolution that's happening in the United States at that time, the Civil Rights Movement, right? The revolution was Freedom Summer. Freedom Summer, 1964, Freedom Summer, the period a little more than 50 years ago, when hundreds of college students, most of them white, had journeyed to Mississippi to help black Mississippians become registered voters. The state's response to that integrated movement had been swift and violent. Less than a month before the GOP met for its national convention in San Francisco, organizers Andrew Goodman, James Chaney, and Michael Schwerner. Now, Chaney was African American, okay, and he lived there in Mississippi. He was born in Mississippi. They had been kidnapped on a dark back road in Neshoba County. The only hint that they had existed was Michael Schwerner's charred Ford station wagon. Now, so the movie Mississippi Burning is about this killing. Okay, I think was it Mississippi Burning? It was one of the. I think it was Mississippi Burning. It's one of those movies. It was in Philadelphia, Mississippi, that they were killed. Okay, and they were killed by the Ku Klux Klan. They go missing June 21st, 1964. Okay, I think it was Mississippi. I think it was Mississippi Burning that was about those killings. Okay, so that's what. So this is what's taking place at this time. Okay, this is what's taking place at this time, and then Barry Goldwater being anti-civil rights. Okay, this is causing more African Americans to leave the Republican Party. So the media attention that followed the men's disappearance roiled the entire South. Now their bodies will be found in early August 1964, buried in the shallow earthen works of a dam, okay, D-A-M. Then 2 weeks after the men's disappearance and mere days before the GOP convention opened, Lyndon Johnson signed the Civil Rights Act into law, making discrimination in public venues illegal. It's July 1964. Okay, but not only that. Yeah, it was the movie Mississippi Burning, 1988 American crime thriller film. The film was directed by Alan Parker. So yeah, it was Mississippi Burning. Starred Gene Hackman and William Dafoe. Okay, so this was July 1964 that the Civil Rights Act was signed. Okay, and it wasn't about sitting on the toilet next to white people. This also dealt with making it illegal to discriminate against people for jobs. It wasn't just public accommodations. There was also dealing with employment. So I encourage people to go to blackpast.org, blackpast.org, P-A-S-T. They have about 13,000 articles there dealing with African-American history and African history. And they have extensive information dealing with the Civil Rights Act of 1964. It's much more than what people think it is. It wasn't about getting a cup of coffee from white people. No. If that's what you think, you probably think Willie Lynch historically existed, and you probably think the Black John Hanson was president. None of that stuff is true. So Peniel Joseph says the events outside the GOP's convention hall affected what went on under its roof. Supporters of the presumed front-runner, liberal New York Governor Nelson Rockefeller, were blindsided by the party's well-organized conservative wing, which nominated Arizona Senator Barry Goldwater. His nickname was Mr. Conservative. Now, Barry Goldwater can be seen as the godfather of the current Tea Party. He wanted the federal government out of the state's business. He believed the Civil Rights Act was unconstitutional, although he said that once it had been enacted into law, it would be obeyed. But states, he said, should implement the law in their own time. Many white Southerners, especially white segregationist Southerners, felt reassured by Barry Goldwater's words. African Americans, says Vince Hutchings, felt anything but reassured. He said, quote, African Americans heard the message that was intended to be heard, which was that Goldwater and the Goldwater wing of the Republican Party were opposed not only to the Civil Rights Act of 1964, but to the Civil Rights Movement in large part as well. So we were born at night, but we weren't born last night. So we said, no, we ain't going for this. So this brought about an abrupt exit from the GOP. Now, keep in mind, by 1960, 2/3 of African Americans had already switched over to the Democratic Party. That starts because of President Herbert Hoover and the Lily White movement going back to 1929, 1933 when he was president. We're going to talk about that in a minute because, see, ChicagoMag.com has a really good article dealing with that. So you got to research Herbert Hoover and the Lily White movement. So when Barry Goldwater, in his acceptance speech, accepting the nomination to be for the Republican nomination to be president, right? Nominee for president. When Goldwater, in his acceptance speech, famously told the ecstatic convention, quote, extremism in the defense of liberty is no vice, end quote, he was speaking of a very specific notion of liberty, said Peniel Joseph. That notion of liberty was, quote, small government, a government that doesn't give out handouts to black people, a government that doesn't have laws that interfere with states' rights, a government that is not conducting a war on poverty. Well, when you study the history of the Civil War, the Confederate states were fighting for states' rights. And they're fighting for states' rights to maintain slaves. States' rights has not, in general, been beneficial for African Americans. So when you hear Goldwater and you hear any these white conservatives talk about quote unquote states' rights, they're dog whistling. That's coded language. Just like Brian Kemp, Secretary of State in Georgia, And Georgia is one of those former Confederate states because when you go to Georgia, they have something in Georgia called Stone Mountain. Stone Mountain in Georgia is a huge mountain, and on the side of the mountain, carved into the side of the mountain, is a huge relief, a huge carving of 3 Confederate heroes. General Robert E. Lee, P.G.T. Beauregard, and Jefferson Davis. I've been to Stone Mountain. I've seen it. I have a lecture dealing with the history of the Confederate monuments, dealing with the Civil War. Stone Mountain is not just a mountain, but in Georgia, they've turned Stone Mountain into an amusement park. I've been there. They have all these rides. All this is centered around the Confederacy. What I mean by that is the attraction to the amusement park is this huge mountain honoring these white supremacists who committed treason against the U.S. government, took up arms against the government to fight to maintain slavery. Then when you go to the top of Stone Mountain, because I've been to the top of Stone Mountain, it took us about 30 minutes to climb up the side of Stone Mountain, to walk where you walk. It ain't like mountain climbing, but you walk. It's a steep mountain. So I'm there with my man Rick Mathis, director of the Black Friday series. So we're going to the top of Stone Mountain because he's going to film my segment of the 3rd installment of Black Friday. Okay? So we get to the top of Stone Mountain, and this is in the summertime in Georgia. So I got on jeans and a 25-pound backpack. I'm hot as hell, dripping sweat, all this stuff, right? So then we get to almost to the top of Stone Mountain. Rick says, you know, you can take the, he said, what he said? He said, you can take the cable car on the way back down. I said, cable car? What the hell you mean cable car? I could have taken the cable car up here? I didn't know that, but I took the cable car back down. Took 30 minutes to walk up. Took 2 minutes to get back down on the cable car. But when you get to the top of Stone Mountain, there's a souvenir shop. How do I know? I've been there. In the souvenir shop, almost on every souvenir, keychains, hats, pennants, mugs, whatever it is, they got these 3 Confederate heroes on the souvenirs. They have turned. You got to go there to see this thing. This is honoring these Confederate heroes who fought to maintain slavery. So you got to understand how deep this thing is. Okay, so we're dealing with Barry Goldwater and African Americans leaving, the ones who are remaining, the third that are remaining, most of them leaving because of Barry Goldwater, and he's anti-civil rights. Okay? So it was a signal both sides heard loud and clear. Senator Barry Goldwater attracted the white Southern votes his advisors thought were essential, paving the way for the Southern strategy that Richard Nixon and Ronald Reagan would use successfully in later years. And the 1/3 of black Republican voters remaining speedily exited the party because we were born at night, but we weren't born last night. We said, no, we getting out of here. We have some problems with the Democrats, but these people are crazy. And we're not going to sit here and finance our own dehumanization. You go back to 1960. It was John F. Kennedy running for president, Democratic nominee, against Richard Nixon, Republican nominee. Dr. King gets arrested in Georgia during a lunch counter sit-in. He gets jailed. And there was one that Kennedy, I can't remember if it was John F. Kennedy or Bobby Kennedy, it was one of them. But first of all, they call Coretta Scott King and give, say how sorry they are. Let me know if there's anything we can do for you. They make a call, get Dr. King sprung out of jail. And this helped to shift the tide in the 1960 presidential election, and caused, even though at that point, right around that point, about 2/3 of African Americans had already switched over to the Democratic Party, but they helped give Kennedy a boost and put him over the top to win the election in 1960, okay, over Nixon. Nixon is going to come back in 68 as a backlash to the civil rights movement, the Black Power movement, affirmative action, the Voting Rights Act of 1965, he's going to come as a backlash in 68 and win the nomination, and he runs on the platform of law and order. He's anti-civil rights, basically. He runs on the platform of law and order. Law and order means protect white people and lock up black people. He's a backlash to the rebellions that were taking place across the country. Okay, 1967 alone, you had 150 major violent 150 violent uprisings in this country. Not all of them were on the level of Detroit or Newark, New Jersey, things like this, but you had 159. Nixon is a backlash to all of that. Okay, and then you're gonna have some African Americans who were still there in the Republican Party. A lot of them are gonna leave because of Nixon. Okay, so it was a signal both sides heard loud and clear. Senator Barry Goldwater attracted the white Southern votes his advisors thought were essential, paving the way for the Southern strategy that Richard Nixon and Ronald Reagan would successfully use years later. And the third of black Republican voters remaining speedily exited the party. Vince Hutchings said it was an abrupt shift, quote, for the relatively few, but still not trivial, fraction of blacks. They moved aggressively and almost unanimously into the Democratic Party. And black voters have stayed there in increasing numbers ever since. Not that all of them want to be. Okay? So this was dealing with policy. If we go back to 1947, 1948, the Democratic Party adopted a more pro-civil rights agenda for the presidential election. The Dixiecrats, which was the Southern obstructionist Democrats, they nominate Strom Thurmond to be their presidential candidate. They bring back out the Confederate battle flag of Northern Virginia under General Robert E. Lee's army that people mistakenly call the Confederate flag. The flag that's on the General Lee car that people keep calling the Confederate flag is not the Confederate flag. There were 3 flags that flew over the Confederate States of America from 1861 to 1865. That flag was never one of them. That's the Confederate battle flag of Northern Virginia under General Robert E. Lee's army. But that flag becomes a symbol of opposition to the civil rights movement. Okay, so you have to understand this history. So these are shifts that we see taking place. Okay? These are shifts that we see taking place. All right, now if we look at the article from ChicagoMag.com, and the calling number is 313-778-7600. 313-778-7600. Okay? We didn't have the guest call in, did we? Okay. 313-778-7600 is the calling number. Hey, Paul Taylor, Sister Neb, if you're out there, call in. How the Black Party of Lincoln lost virtually the entire black vote in 88 years. See, this is history that you're not going to get a lot of other places. How the Black Party of Lincoln lost virtually the entire black vote in 88 years. In 1928, the African-American newspaper, the Chicago Defender, warned the GOP, the Grand Old Party, the Republicans, warned them that it was in danger of alienating African Americans. They did not listen, and the fall came fast. When we come back from the break, you don't want to miss this. We're going to deal with this history, and we're going to deal with Herbert Hoover and the Lily White movement, because all this stuff goes back to that, before President Roosevelt and the New Deal. You listen to the African History Network show right here, 9:10 a.m., the Superstation of Future Radio. I'm Michael Imhotep. Visit our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. You can order our DVD lectures there. Also, click on the yellow donate button there. You can donate to the African History Network. Help us stay on the air. Help us keep doing the research. We'll be back in a few minutes.
We all
swallow fried food. But the problem is
I just
all
opened
that
up that
excess
guest
oil and
line.
fat
What
can
time
Okay.
are we supposed to call in?
overweight. Well, now
9:35.
Like
I ain't got time to
an amazing kitchen miracle that uses
Oh my gosh.
I want that.
Did they call you because I didn't? Well, even if I don't open the lineup, it still should ring on the board.
Yeah, it's the ring. Okay, I ain't here calling it. It's okay. Hey, can you turn that down in here, please? All right, guys, stand by. We'll be back in 2 minutes. And then, okay, so what I'm going to do is we're going to play. Okay, so where are we at in that clip? What point are we at?
We're at 23. We stopped at 23:15.
Okay, so we're going to pick it up right about there. And then the last clip is going to be 1 minute and 20 seconds we'll deal with. Okay. How's everybody doing? Stand by. Okay, so we got this. Executive Order 8802. 313-778-7600 is the call-in number. 313-778-7600 is the call-in number if you have a question or comment. All right, and we got to give an update on the Charles H. Wright Museum. Where's the damn flyer? All right. How's everybody doing? Okay, so we've got Helena, huh?
You're back in 1 minute, 18 seconds.
All right, I'm right back. Be right back, guys. Just a second.
Call 800-379-4799, 800-379-4799.
Okay.
Thanks for calling the Sam Magazine, please. Bond? All right, hold on.
All right, I'm going to send you this other clip. We may have time for about 3 minutes of it. All right. How's everybody doing? Yeah, 313-778-7600. All right, coming back in about 30 seconds, everybody.
Ready.
Welcome back to the African History Network show right here on 910 AM, the Superstation of Future Radio. Hey, I'm your host, Brother Michael Imhotep. It is Sunday, October 14, 2018, and we are live tonight. 313-778-7600 is the call-in number. If you have a quick question or comment. We started out dealing with some of the comments Kanye West made during his 10-minute rant at the White House with Donald Trump earlier in the week. And then also we dealt with, I was sharing some of the segments that Roland Martin dealt with on his daily digital show, Roland Martin Unfiltered, when he went and broke down Kanye West's comments point by point, dealt with what was historically inaccurate and non-factual and what was factual. Okay. So we'll share another segment of that with you also. Okay. All right. Before the break, I was talking about the history of how and why African Americans switched from being largely Republican, switched from the Republican Party to the Democratic Party. And it dealt with policies. It dealt with the Republican Party being anti-civil rights, okay, and us being able to get more out of the Democratic Party. This is what this dealt with, okay. So before we continue that, because I want to go to this article dealing with how the party of Lincoln lost virtually the entire black vote in 88 years, got to let you know that coming up this Wednesday at Central United Methodist Church. Central United Methodist Church is another meeting dealing with saving the Charles H. Wright Museum. Do the right thing. WRIGHT. Do the right thing. You'll be able to sign a petition, sign and share the petition, support current programming, current progressive African-centered programming at the museum, because there's an attempt to water down the programming. You know, we had Paul Taylor and Sister Neb on the show last week. You can last week's show is available in audio podcast. Go to AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, and click on the homepage, click on the link for podcasts. Also, where you get your podcasts, whether it's Castbox, TuneIn.com, FM Player, iTunes, Blog Talk Radio, just search for the African History Network show. We're there as well. This is taking place Wednesday, October 18th, 6:30 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. Central United Methodist Church, located at 23 East Adams Avenue, Detroit, Michigan. Of course, it's free to attend. I'll be there as well. Sign our Color of Change petition. Maintain Black legacy and involvement at the Charles H. Wright Museum of African American History. And we'll get this on our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com also. Okay, so how the party of Lincoln lost virtually the entire black vote in 88 years. In 1928, the Chicago Defender warned the GOP that it was in danger of alienating African Americans. They did not listen, and the fall came fast. Okay, this is from ChicagoMag.com. All right, so in the book Party Ideologies in America, 1828 to 1996. Party Ideologies in America, 1828 to 1996. Political scientist John Gehring marks the beginning of the modern Republican Party as Herbert Hoover's shifting campaign rhetoric in 1928 and 1932, 1928 and 1932, when he talked more about the virtues of the American home and family than hard-tack economics, okay? Now, this is, so we know 1929 stock market crash, which causes the Great Depression, right? Now, President Herbert Hoover's oratory about the progress of the individual being threatened by an overzealous government bureaucracy stuck around for the next 8 decades. That's about 80 years. And the wisdom of generations has helped us discern that this was indeed the start of a new Republican era. In the final weeks of the 1928 general election for president, the Chicago Defender printed a legendary African-American owned newspaper founded by Robert Abbott, the Chicago Defender, okay? The Chicago Defender printed a series of articles and editorials that listed post-war grievances after World War I, which ends in 1918, post-war grievances with the Republican Party. In Washington, D.C., where the federal government was in direct authority, Republican presidents Warren G. Harding and Calvin Coolidge, as well as Republican majorities in the U.S. Congress, had not only acquiesced to the segregation of public transit, but failed to stop or even criticize parades by thousands of Ku Klux Klansmen before the White House. The newspaper, the Chicago Defender, was particularly dissatisfied with the current Republican nominee for president, Herbert Hoover, who had spoken favorably of making the party, quote unquote, lily white. This is the lily white movement in the Republican Party, and excluded African Americans from their traditional role in that year's Republican National Convention. Most troubling of all was the candidate's covert, Herbert Hoover, his covert backing from the Ku Klux Klan, whose members despised the Democratic nominee, New York Governor Al Smith, because he was Catholic. Because, see, when you study the history of the Ku Klux Klan, founded December 24th, 1865 in Pulaski, Tennessee, when you read the bylaws of the Knights of the Ku Klux Klan, see, you have to be a white, male, Protestant, at least 16 years old. They didn't accept Catholics. And when you study the Klan, who they were attacking, they weren't just attacking and lynching African Americans, even though that was the majority of them. Because, see, from 1882 to 1964, they lynched about 3,400 African Americans, but they lynched 1,297 white people also, because they were killing Republicans, white Republicans. We study the history of them, and they were killing white Catholics. And they were killing Jews also. When you deal with the history of the Ku Klux Klan, the majority of their attacks were against African Americans. That's not all who they were attacking and killing when you actually deal with their history. Okay? There was an article that I think it was Yolanda Spivey. I think it was an article Yolanda Spivey wrote dealing with 5 presidents who were members of the Ku Klux Klan or something like that. Okay? And I'll see if I can pull that out. Let's see. Yeah, 5. Let's see if we can pull this up. 5 U.S. presidents from iloveblackpeople.net. Who wrote this? It's not coming up. What's wrong with their site? Okay. Google that. 5 U.S. presidents were members of the Ku Klux Klan. Okay. Maybe it's coming up. No, it's not coming up. Okay. But Google that. Okay. And I'll see if I can maybe pull this up here. It's been a while since I've looked at that article. But from 1882 to 1964, the Klan lynches about 1,297 white people. Okay? Let's see if we can pull this up here. iloveblackpeople.net. Okay. April V. Taylor, that's who wrote it. I interviewed April Taylor a few years ago. 5 U.S. presidents were members of the Ku Klux Klan. Okay? And in the article, let's see, let's go to, they talk about Woodrow Wilson. They talk about, let's see here. Okay. 1882. Between 1882 and 1964, 3,446 African Americans and 1,297 white people were lynched by the Ku Klux Klan. Okay, many people would be shocked to know that at least 5 U.S. presidents were members of the Ku Klux Klan, according to the Southern Poverty Law Center. Quote, the KKK started in the summer of 1866, was it actually started December 24th, 1865 in Pulaski, Tennessee. Some sources say 1866, but when you go to history.com, and I've done a lot of research, it goes back to December 24th, 1865, Christmas Eve, okay? 6 Confederate officers decided to organize a social club. They decided to use the term Kuklos, K-U-K-L-O-S, which means circle. After adding the word Klan, the name Ku Klux Klan was born. In his book, Setting the Record Straight, American History in Black and White. Setting the Record Straight, American History in Black and White. Author David Barton details the political history of the KKK, noting that the original targets of the Ku Klux Klan were Republicans, both black and white, and that between 1882 and 1964, 3,446 African Americans and 1,297 whites were lynched by the Ku Klux Klan. David Barton goes on to point out that the Ku Klux Klan had its roots in the Democratic Party, and that the first Grand Wizard of the KKK, Nathan Bedford Forrest, was honored for his leadership at the 1868 Democratic National Convention. So when you study the history of the Klan, it's not the Democratic Party did not create the Klan, but the founders of the Klan were Democrats and members of the Democratic Party. Okay, there's a difference between the party creating it and members creating it. There's a difference. Now, for those who do not believe that the roots of the Democratic Party are racist, one only needs to note that not a single Democrat voted for the 14th Amendment, which granted citizenship to former slaves. Okay? And once again, to understand the origins of what we call the Democratic Party, you got to go back to 1828, the Jacksonian Democrats, who were named after President Andrew Jackson. The History.com has a good article dealing with this. Okay? And then the other thing that we have to understand is that because of the Civil Rights Act of 64, the Voting Rights Act of 65, this shift of African Americans going into the Democratic Party, the obstructionist Democrats, many times called Dixiecrats, those Southern obstructionist Democrats, the overwhelming majority of them don't stay in the Democratic Party. They go to the Republican Party. And that's where they are today. This is why I tell people, you got to study the policies. Don't just look at party affiliation. No, you got to study the policies. Because when you look at the policies coming from the Republican Party, even though the problems I have with Democrats, and I'm neither Democrat nor Republican, but most of these harmful policies, especially on a national level, are coming from the Republican Party, because I study policies. The majority of these, and when you look at what Trump is doing, Trump is systematically reversing policies President Obama had in place, and many of these policies were beneficial for African Americans. But most of us don't know it because we don't do research. Okay? So, go to whitehouse.gov, and search for the document, Progress of the African American Community During the Obama Administration. Because everywhere I go and lecture, I talk about this. Nobody's read it. It's been there. It was there during the presidency. I first heard Andre Michael Eggleston talk about this on Reverend Al Sharpton's show. Okay? And you know we carry Reverend Al Sharpton's show right here on 910 a.m. the Superstation, Monday through Friday, 2 p.m. to 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You can listen to Reverend Al. If you have any questions, Reverend Al, what have you done? You can call in and talk to Reverend Al directly. You don't have to post stupid ass nonsense on social media asking other people who don't know what he's done. You can call in and talk to him directly. You see? So I just find it interesting when people post stupid ass nonsense on social media and they can pick up the phone and call Reverend Al directly and find out what he's done. But they don't want to do that. Because I've had people do that. I say, well, hey, wait, hold on. You can listen to Reverend Al right here. Here's the link. Here's the number. You can call in live and talk to him. Oh, no. I don't want to do that. I should be able to look out my window and see what Reverend Al Sharpton has done. Okay, whatever. I just find that interesting. When I provide you with the information to get the answers that you seek, you don't want to open that door. But read this here. Progress of the African American community during the era, during the Obama administration. This is at whitehouse.gov. What's whitehouse.gov? The official website of the White House. It's still there. Trump hasn't taken it down yet. You need to go read this. Because, see, a lot of these policies, Trump has attacked and reversed. There have been over 100 policy reversals. So I heard somebody calling Reverend Al Sharpton's show and say, well, most people I know already had health insurance. Really? Did you know that the Affordable Health Care Act gave health care to 3 million non-elderly African Americans who did not already have health care? I'm pretty sure some of them lived in Chicago. What's the number one reason why people file for bankruptcy? Medical bills. Did you know that because of the Affordable Health Care Act, that African Americans achieved their longest average lifespan in this country because more of us could get preventative health care on average 72 years? Life expectancy at birth is the highest it's ever been for African Americans. In 2014, life expectancy at birth was 72.5 years for African American males and 78.4 for African American females, the highest point in the historical series for both genders. I wonder why. And Trump is attacking the Affordable Health Care Act. Trump has blocked subsidies to keep premiums lower. We know premiums go up each year. He's blocked subsidies. We know that last year when they had open enrollment, the Trump administration cut the amount of days for open enrollment from 90 to 45. Why would you cut it in half? And see, what's happened is a whole lot of white people who keep voting, a whole lot of poor white people who keep voting Republican, they found out that the Affordable Health Care Act and Obamacare is the same damn thing. So then you started seeing all these white people across the country, all these poor white people organizing saying, don't take my health care. In Kentucky, where you got Senator Mitch McConnell, son of a Mitch. All these poor white people keep voting for Republicans in Kentucky. In Kentucky, They don't call it the Affordable Health Care Act. They call it Kentucky Connect. It's the same thing. And other states have done that as well. They don't call it the Affordable Health Care Act. They call it something else. And when Trump ran for president, usually he didn't call it the Affordable Health Care Act. He called it Obamacare. So a lot of these ignorant people keep voting Republican, poor whites. They said, "Oh, get rid of Obamacare." They didn't know it was the same thing. So I'm a researcher. I deal with facts and evidence, not opinions and feelings. I deal with facts and evidence, not feelings and emotions. Proper documentation ends all conversation. You need to read this. WhiteHouse.gov, search for this. Progress of the African American community during the Obama administration. So the people who keep saying Obama didn't do anything, how can Trump keep reversing what Obama did if Obama didn't do anything? When people ask that question, I ask them, what type of research have you done? Because, see, I have an entire lecture called African American Resistance in the Era of Donald Trump, Voter Suppression, Reparations, and How Elections Have Consequences. And I show you policies that Trump is reversing. Why did Trump redeclare the war on drugs? After Trump asked African Americans, what the hell do you have to lose? See, we don't understand politics. We don't understand how to protect our gains. We don't understand how to assess our gains so you know how to protect your gains. So then also, after you read that one, read the last report card from the Urban League, National Urban League. I got it right here. I printed it up. I do research. Most people ain't even read this. When I do lectures, speaking in San Diego in July, Return to Gods. People haven't read this information. When I was speaking that was August. Return to Gods. It was Professor Kabahai Combinate. When I was speaking at the Liberated Minds Black Homeschooling Education Expo, third weekend of July, did a presentation, Lessons from the Film Black Panther, Economic Guerrilla Warfare, Political Self-Defense, and How to Counter the Vote. Ask about this. Nobody's read it. Really? Then read this one here, the Urban League. January 2017, almost 2 years ago. Obama administration scorecard. This breaks down his policies, and they rate them, and they talk about how they impacted the African American community. Now, we didn't get everything we wanted out of President Obama, but what we did get, most of that is being reversed under Trump. So to understand how to vote in the next election, you have to be able to assess the policies that were enacted in the previous election and the impact it had on you, to then understand how to navigate and to understand what to protect and what to change. Well, if you don't know any of that, then you'll stay at home like 1/3 of the 4 million Obama voters from 2012 who didn't vote in 2016. 4 million of them, 1/3 of them were African Americans. And all this stuff is being attacked under Trump. If Obama didn't do anything, how can Trump keep systematically reversing what Obama did? Or maybe you didn't do any research before you opened your mouth. Maybe that's what it is. Let's go back to what I was talking about before I started talking about what I was talking about. So this goes back to the article, because we're dealing with the history of why African Americans switched from the Republican Party to the Democratic Party. This article, the second article here, is from ChicagoMag.com. ChicagoMag.com. How the party of Lincoln lost virtually the entire black vote in 88 years. In 1928, the Chicago Defender warned the GOP that it was in danger, Mystical said, danger, of alienating African Americans. They didn't listen, and the fall came. And I ain't talking about the season either. So, the newspaper, the Chicago Defender, was particularly dissatisfied with the current Republican nominee for president, Herbert Hoover, who had spoken favorably of making the party lily white and excluding African Americans from their traditional role in that year's Republican National Convention. Most troubling of all was the candidate's covert backing from the Ku Klux Klan, whose members despised the Democratic nominee, New York Governor Al Smith, because he was Catholic. This was just 65 years after the Emancipation Proclamation was signed, okay? And that goes into effect January 1st, 1863. But read the Emancipation Proclamation. It did not free the slaves. Stop teaching your children that the Emancipation Proclamation freed the slaves. No. Read it. Go to archives.gov. Go to loc.gov, Library of Congress website. It basically tells you that the slaves in the states of rebellion, the Confederacy, they're free, and the slaves in the border states like Delaware and Maryland and Kentucky, they're still slaves. You got to read it. It gives all these exceptions. Now, if the Confederacy separated, seceded from the Union, set up their own government, no longer under Union rules, how can you then make a law to dictate what they do? It was a military strategy. The Civil War was not fought to free the slaves. The Civil War was fought to bring the South back into the Union, which was the economic engine of this country. Okay? Lincoln said that if he could keep the Union together and keep slavery intact, he would do that. And then at his inaugural address, March 4th, 1861, Lincoln said he had no intention of, this was the month before the Civil War started, because the Civil War started April 12th, 1861 with the attack on Fort Sumter in South Carolina. Lincoln is inaugurated first term as president March 4th, 1861. And he says he has no intention of ending slavery in the, I think it was ending slavery in the states that had slavery, and really no intention of stopping the expansion of slavery either, okay? But, and things like this is going to infuriate black Republicans, like Frederick Douglass. And what he's doing is he's trying to stop more states from seceding from the Union, because South Carolina secedes December 20th, 1860. By February of 1861, you got about 6 more states that secede from the Union. So he's trying to stop the secession. So he's trying to reassure them. He's trying to keep the Union together. See, when you research this, you find out that Lincoln was not an abolitionist. That ain't me saying that. That's the History Channel. And they're white. Go to history.com. I think it's called 5 Facts About Abraham Lincoln. They tell you, Lincoln was not an abolitionist. That's not Dr. Leonard Jeffries saying it. That's not Professor Kabahau Kamene saying it. These are white people telling you this. Let's continue. So this was just 65 years after the Emancipation Proclamation was signed. Many people who had been emancipated from slavery by the actions of a Republican president were still alive, with many more living under the rule of Democratic, Jim Crow, Southern politicians. So what the Chicago Defender did next was quite bold. Finally, in an October 20th, 1928 editorial entitled, "What We Want," the Chicago Defender made a dramatic announcement. Quote, "We want justice in America, and we mean to get it. If 50 years of support to the Republican Party doesn't get us justice, then we must, of necessity, shift our allegiance to new quarters," end quote. It was the first time the Chicago Defender had failed to endorse the Republican presidential candidate since 1912. In the run-up to the 1912 election, Woodrow Wilson, another white supremacist, despite a typical history as a Southern Democrat, had reached out to black voters, including leaders like Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois. After Wilson's victory, the paper reported that a substantial number of blacks supported him. Once in office, Wilson immediately alienated his black supporters. Robert Abbott, the founder of the Chicago Defender, is a diehard Republican his whole life, but with Herbert Hoover, who is explicitly, okay, and the author Makelly is saying this, Ethan Makelly. He said, Robert Abbott, he said, I wouldn't describe him, he said, but with Herbert Hoover, who is explicitly, I wouldn't describe him as a racist, but he's interested in what he called a lily white Republican Party. This is after generations in which the Republican Party has stood for racial justice, is founded on racial justice. Okay, this is after generations in which the Republican Party has stood for racial justice, is founded on racial justice. So Robert Abbott, the founder of the Chicago Defender, a historic African-American newspaper owned and operated, feels that it's quite a betrayal. At this point, even he is frustrated with the Republican Party. Keep in mind, the Republican Party was founded by groups of abolitionists in 1854 as a direct result backlash to the Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854. And they were founded to be in opposition to the Jacksonian Democrats back at this time. And there's that famous Chicago Defender cartoon. There was a phrase, quote, "The Republican Party is the ship, all else is the sea." And there's a cartoon the Chicago Defender runs that says, quote, "If this is the ship, we'll take the sea," end quote. Now, I want to try to share this, squeeze in this last clip here. We have it at the, do we have it at the 1 hour mark? 1 hour, 20 seconds? We got it at that mark? No. The first with Roland Martin. Cue it up to about 1 minute and 20 seconds. I want you to hear Dr. Greg Carr, because there's so much to cover. We'll probably have to do part 2 next week. Because see, I started putting together this show on Tuesday, and then this debacle from the White House happened on Thursday. I want you to hear this, okay? They got the little commercial playing. Okay, just let me know when you have that queued up, and be sure to you can find this clip on YouTube. Go to Roland Martin on YouTube, ROLAND. Roland Martin on YouTube is from October 11th. Let's go to this clip here. Turn up in here. Turn up in here so they can hear on Facebook, please.
One is by invitation because they somehow can be used by the person sitting there.
Or exploited.
Well, or exploited. The other reason is because they're unavoidable.
No, you left the third one.
What's that third?
They worked there.
Oh, no, that's true. Oh, yeah, the butlers. Yeah, no question. And in fact, the purpose of this meeting was lunch. But anyway, let's set that to the side. Your grandmother, your great-grandmother, 1901, Memphis, I'm from Nashville. About a year or 2 years after your great-grandmother was born, Booker T. Washington was invited to the White House by Theodore Roosevelt, an open racist. And the white press went apoplectic. The reason that he was invited was because Booker T. Washington was seen as the spokesperson for the entire race. He had been propped up by Cornelius Vanderbilt, Andrew Carnegie, so and so. It wasn't because Roosevelt somehow liked Booker T. Washington. He was the guy who was on the table to negotiate. Let's go back in time. Abraham Lincoln. Frederick Douglass invited to the White House. Why? Because Lincoln needed Douglass to help him win the war. Let's come forward in time. Another racist, Woodrow Wilson. When Monroe Trotter went to the White House, he blasted Wilson so tough that Wilson literally threw him out of the White House. Let's come forward a little bit more to Franklin Roosevelt and now talk about A. Philip Randolph, who of course was there because he told Roosevelt, I'm going to shut Washington down with a march on Washington, which forced Roosevelt to sign Executive Order 8802, which opened up jobs in the war industry, which is why Kanye people and people in Detroit and Oakland and Portland ended up in those cities, in those integrated jobs to get those jobs that are not there now because industrialization collapsed them. But let's talk about, I want to talk about a woman.
Okay. Pause right there. Okay. So he talked, that's my man, Dr. Greg Carr, chair of the Afro-American Studies Department at Howard University. He talked about something very, very important in history that people don't understand. That's Executive Order 8802 that was enacted June 25th, 1941 by President Roosevelt. But it was A. Philip Randolph, who was the head of the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters, that threatened Roosevelt. And this was about opening up Defense Department jobs to African Americans and breaking down the walls of segregation to get these jobs. He threatened to put 100,000 African Americans on Washington, to march on Washington, and embarrass Roosevelt. And that forced Roosevelt to sign Executive Order 8802. This is how that happened. Britannica.com. Read this. Encyclopedia Britannica, Britannica.com, Executive Order 8802. This deals with this history that Dr. Greg Carr is talking about. So what they were talking about is when you have a seat at the table, it ain't just about being at the table. You have to have an agenda and know your facts when you have a seat at the table. So he was giving different historical examples. And he was talking about how A. Philip Randolph had a seat at the table and he got something accomplished, and it wasn't a bunch of gibberish either. Okay, we got to get out of here. Hey, visit our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Those in Detroit, I will see you Saturday, October 20th, bright and early, 8:30 a.m. at Hartford Memorial Baptist Church, 18700 James Cousins Freeway. Hey, give them a call, 313-861-1300. 313-861-1300 about the Hartford Social Justice Ministry Conference. I'll be speaking there, dealing with the distortion of the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., the revolutionary. Will not be televised on the television. We have the information at AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Stay tuned for Pastor Mo. Remember, right knowledge corrects wrong behavior. It's not over till we win. Wakanda forever. And you listen to 9:10 a.m. to Superstation, the future of radio. Talk to you later. Peace.
Hi, this is Jack Lessenberry. I hope your weekend
All
was
right.
great. Tom Daniels is a white guy.
All right, guys, look, I got to get out of here. We only have 2 hours, so I'm going to try to finish it. See, I got a lot more information to cover. So I'm going to try to do a broadcast tomorrow. Be sure to visit our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. We need your support. If you like this type of information, if you like this type of programming, okay, you can help to support the African History Network, and you can help. Can you turn that down here, please? You can help support. I'm still broadcasting Facebook. Yeah, turn that down here if you can. You can help support the African History Network. Help us stay on the air. Order our DVD lectures, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Then also, you can donate to the African History Network. PayPal.me/the AHN show. You don't have to have a PayPal account. You can use your debit card or credit card. PayPal.me/the AHN show. Okay. Also, you can go to our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. It takes a lot of research because I'm the one doing the research. I pulled together the content for this show. It takes I do a lot of research each week to prepare to do these shows. The sale of the DVDs helps me to finance that and be able to do that. Okay. And also the donations. Then we have also the bundle pack. The Africans that were here before Columbus. We're posting this here on the thread of the broadcast. The Africans that were here before Columbus. All this is at our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. This is an 8 DVD bundle pack, including a lecture from Dr. David Imhotep, who wrote the book, The First Americans Were Africans, Documented Evidence. And then also we have the Meltrek animated series for children. We have the cartoons, the books, all that stuff, okay? All this is for the children, to educate our children. You can use this in home schools, different things like that. All right, and we have it in the bundle pack as well. Okay, so all that is at our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. All right, we got to get out of here. Did you see Pastor Mo come in?
I didn't.
Okay, I know. I'm pretty sure he was there with Mr. Faircon today. So I left early because I had to finish getting ready for this show.
Yeah.
Okay, guys, look, we got to get out of here. Talk to you all later. If you have any questions, post them here on the thread. Also, you can inbox me here on Facebook if you have any questions. Or you can email me at info@AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Info@AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. You can email me there as well. Talk to y'all later. Peace.